Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the official Curious Realm coverage of the Texas UFO Conference right here in Jefferson, Texas. We have the pleasure of being joined by our good friend, Rita Louise. Always a cut-up, on air and off. Always a pleasure seeing you at these shows. Last time I saw you was actually at MUFON Symposium. We were crazy busy there with interviews. It was great, so it's awesome to see you here. What are you here speaking about at this year's UFOCon?
So this year I'm speaking about reptilians and underground bases.
Awesome.
And looking at it from a mythological point of view to put out the understanding of maybe it's true.
Well, and you actually have the movie Icon, which is available out there, deconstructing the archetypes of the ancients. And it's interesting that you are here talking specifically about reptilians, because that is a concept that, yes, does stretch back through the history of mankind. The idea of reptilian beings being on Earth or talking with reptilians. So let's explore this topic a little bit, Rita.
So when you look at the mythic record, the different gods are described in an assorted different ways.
Yeah.
And so there's one group of gods that are consistently described as being half man, half snake, half man, half reptile, half man, half fish. And so the word reptilians isn't really tied to them. But if you sit there and take the notion of people are taking an oral tradition, because these stories are ancient, and before people were documenting things with art and talking about these half man, half reptile looking things, then maybe that was where their mind went, that was the easiest way for them to portray it, because why would you think of a reptilianoid, that's an upright, two-armed person that has scales?
Well, and I mean, really, why would you think chimeric to begin with? The combination of human and animal, which is once again very frequent whenever you're talking gods, goddesses of ancient cultures, especially whenever you're looking at Sumerian culture, Inky, things like that, where half fish, half man, things like that. So, yeah, that is a very, very old trope in the history of humanity.
But again, there's the whole part, you're taking a verbal description and putting a graphic image with it.
Sure.
So one of the things that I bring forward in my presentation are all of these images of the classic half man, half serpent, Kronos, all of them.
Yep.
However, there have been some sculptures unearthed that actually that look very reptilian. They kind of have like a serpent face, but a humanoid body.
Sure.
That date back to like 4,000 to 6,000 BC, which is prior to the advent of writing, even in Sumeria, prior to cuneiform. And then they just kind of disappear, and this new evolution of imagery appears with the chimeric form, which I think is,
Yeah. And now, let's carry that forward into modern society, because, of course, there have been reports for decades. I mean, almost, especially once you start looking at California, places like that, there have been stories since the 1800s of lizard people in the tunnels of San Francisco, things like that. So the idea of reptilian humanoid critters being around, even Barton Nunley's book Inhumanoids, these stories have been around for a long time here in America.
Well, and you find the stories in America. I mean, all you need to do is think of Quetzalcoatl, who is half man, half serpent. And so it's not that those stories are contained in Sumeria or contained in Egypt. You find them around the world. And these stories of underground bases and underground realms transcend every culture with these beings, non-human beings, whether they describe them as some kind of reptile thing or not, living there, but the accounts always describe them as not being human.
Now, let's get into some modern experiences that people have had with reptilians, that kind of stuff.
I mean, I'm not a modern girl at all. If it's old, I will talk to you about it.
Well, I mean, when it comes to underground bases, things like that, because of course there was the whole rumor of Dulce base, things like that. The story that came out of there, where there were numerous, not just grays, but numerous species of aliens there in the base. What's some of that you're speaking about today, as far as underground bases and reptilians? I
mean, and I'm just using that as kind of the stepping off point of these are the modern stories that have come forward. You know, John Lear talks about it, and I have notes. Thank God for notes.
Right?
You know, because that's what people think of. Many people, when they look at UFO material, you know, and alien material, think it's a modern phenomena. You know, it started in 1940 with Roswell, and there wasn't anything prior to that. And what I really like to bring to the table is these stories come from deep antiquity. You know, and one of the things I was looking at was this timeline of more contemporary ufology. And there are these stories of aerial ships that you find from the 1800s, long before there were planes, around the advent of the hot air balloon, but they were clearly not hot air balloons. So what would be flying around in the sky if it wasn't a UFO?
Yeah. And even at the time, technical UFO, they didn't know what it was. All they could refer to it as was an airship. Once again, these stories going back, like you said, millennia of reptilian humanoids. What is the overall, I guess, affect on humanity? Do they seem to be stories where these creatures are ill-tempered toward humans, not here for our vested interest, or are they here to help us?
That's a great question, and it's one of the hardest questions to answer because there's a bit of a conundrum. You know, so contemporary people suggest that these reptilians are here and they want to control the world, and, you know, they're underlie the New World Order and are creating all of this havoc on the planet.
Within our political system.
That's right.
Yeah.
And when you look at what's going on in the world today, maybe.
It may be a much easier explanation, scarily enough.
Well, and when I look at it, it's like, why would humanity do some of the stuff that they're doing to humanity? You know, so from that perspective, it makes me go,
Yeah.
But when you look at the stories, these reptilian beings are the ones who help create humanity. They're the ones that educated humanity, you know, so they did all of these things to help us and move us forward.
And that has been a very interesting take that I've heard from numerous people, is the fact that, no, as a matter of fact, the reptilians are not the ones with ill intent toward humanity. They are the ones who've helped us along, that it's the Greys that are much more interested in how we are a vehicle for souls and how to harvest that energy, and the idea of DNA experimentation and abduction and things like that. So it's interesting that you bring that up. What are some of the points in antiquity that kind of support that, Rita?
Well, I mean, the gods, there are tons of stories of these. So in antiquity, the reptilians are often referred to as fertility gods, you know, or they're associated with the water, you know, so they have a very distinct iconographic persona. And so they're always the ones that are identified as creating humanity and being the ones to teach us. But what I find interesting and makes my brain ponder is, when you look at those stories, many times the teaching of humanity was considered
anathema.
I don't know what that word is, but
a no-no. You
Yeah,
ended up like
you were
Prometheus.
punished.
You
were
ended up like
punished.
Prometheus chained to
Exactly.
a stone and a vulture eating your liver every single day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so what was the goal to keep us as being primate-like
Yeah.
and not doing anything?
Yeah.
Or was the goal for us to evolve and become godlike?
Well, and even whenever you go through and humanistically look at, because my brother and I got into this conversation on the way down here. We both come from a very not very religious background. I studied as a seminarian. He was a youth minister for years. Both pretty well versed in Bible history, things like that, and especially Hebrew and Abrahamic root within that. And understanding the story of creation and the fact that there are two stories there, back to back. It's not just one story.
I have an answer.
It actively says first story and second story. And they're both the same story told in a different way because they're both from two different cultures.
I have an answer for that.
And, and the point here is the serpent, this thing that we have now religiously been taught over millennia to, you're cursed to the ground, because he was cursed to the ground because he made humanity understand that they had a choice. No, you won't die immediately. You'll be as gods and know good from evil if you eat from this tree. Mm-hmm. Whereas the tree of life, sure, you'll live for eternity, but you'll live for eternity in ignorance. So which one would you like? So because he gave us the choice, once again, cast down.
That's right.
Was the serpent actively doing anything bad by exposing us to free will?
That's the question. And that's the question. But I want to go back to your two stories in the Bible.
Yeah.
So when you start looking at creation stories in other cultures, you find two primary narratives. One, that humanity is created out of mud or the earth. And then the other one is that they're created out of some piece of genetic material. So
Yes.
Eve is created out of the rib of Adam.
Yeah.
But then when you look at the Sumerian story, which I find interesting, it takes both of those and blends them together.
Yeah.
Where they take a clay bowl, so now you have the earth, and the essence, the spit, or the blood of the gods is put into this bowl and mixed with the genetic material of the primates, and humanity is created.
Yeah.
So there are the two stories, but you also have these two major themes that you find very consistent in this.
Yes, and that you find throughout mythologies across humanity, especially even the concept of life being breathed into that mud, and the idea that, our words are more powerful than our actions because of that, because the world was spoken into being. We now take part in that vibration of creation. So it's interesting to see that even that knowledge is once again secreted away and occulted from most people, Rita. And it's always been interesting to me how once again many people get sucked into the rabbit hole of the evil reptilians. When in all actuality, once again, it's typically been the opposite way around. They are the ones that have given us and exposed us to the choice, or exposed us to the technology, or given us the wisdom that we keep looking to return. Even the ancient Mayans were looking for the return of Quetzalcoatl, the serpent god. They were awaiting that return forever and always.
It is interesting that in some stories, not all, but some stories, there's this notion of, well, when they created humanity, they made them too smart and they had to dumb them down, and because they would become, and this is my favorite, they would become godlike.
Yeah.
But when we got that choice and we started learning to do things, if you think about contemporary society now, we are doing things that are godlike based on the mythic record. We're flying around in aerial craft. We are doing genetic engineering.
Absolutely.
We are doing DNA work and making clones, and so we are godlike now.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's just it. You know, the old quote that any science to an old culture would be indistinguishable from magic. You know, the things that we talk about as magic, it's something that we discuss on the show regularly, Rita, is the idea that we as humanity have lost ourselves and our knowledge numerous times over. The Pumapunku is a prime example where you see very large megalithic stones from a culture that the next culture said, well, that's so good, we're going to build on top of that. And we look at them as a megalithic culture. And they were like, but their stones were way bigger than our stones, and they were older than us. And then you see Spanish architecture on top of the megalithic architecture. Rocks. And it's like bricks. It's like mud bricks.
With a lot of mortar.
Yeah. And it's like you see these huge planks of stone that somebody 30,000 years ago was able to move up that mountain and make it happen. And the Spanish couldn't.
But what I think is interesting in talking about that area, you know, in Peru, is that there is the belief that, like Sacsayhuaman, the wall with those giant stones with the intricately pieced together rocks, had been built 50 years prior to the arrival of the Spaniards. And an intelligent person, how's that, would go, but there has to be some old codger guy that remembers building those walls and the technology. Like, how could the technology just disappear? And the thing is, we write things down, you know, and ancient cultures wrote things down, but did it survive? You know, it's kind of the idea of fantastic. I've got literally a half terabyte thumb drive right here. It's got schematics on it. It's got data. It's got stories from humanity, all kinds of things. Throw it over my shoulder onto a beach and find it. In even 50 years, will they know what a thumb drive is? We have kids right now that don't know what an 8-track tape is. They're just now learning what a vinyl record is. How to use a rotary phone.
And that's quite literally a recovery of technology because of people's interest in that technology. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm Cajun. It's the example I normally give on the show. I'm Cajun. My mother is 100% Cajun. I'm 50%. You're hard-pressed to find a Cajun my mother's age who speaks Cajun. One generation, a language indigenous to America, almost gone. 50 years. That's all it takes for us to lose humanity and lose our knowledge as a greater general population. You know, 50 years ago, you could have gone out and probably in this town of Jefferson found 3 different guys to hand carve you a spiral wooden column.
But it's changed. You know, people sit there and talk about oral tradition and the whole telephone thing, and I tell you the story and you modify the story. And proper oral tradition does not work that way. And exactly. You know, and I contest that belief because there are stories of, you know, especially like in Native American culture.
Aboriginal culture.
Yeah.
10,000 years unchanged.
But there are stories of there was a meeting 7 years ago, and the guy who is mentally recording the meeting could come back in and repeat contracts word for word of what was said in the meeting before. And people think we don't have the ability to have that kind of memory, but I'm going to bring it into contemporary times. Think about the cover singer of a band who knows the words to thousands of songs and can just sit there. Play me Hotel California. Okay, play me this.
I'll do you one better. You remember the Rolodex you used to keep in your head?
Yes. Now it's passwords.
Of no less than 50 people that you could just pick up a phone and dial 10 numbers. 7 if they were local. But 10 numbers. And you kept them in your head. If you were put into jail right now and had one phone call without your cell phone, do you got somebody that A, can take the call?
Nobody.
B, can take a collect call, you know? But seriously, that's how fast we progress and how fast our brains forget to flex that part of it. You know?
We forget
there
was the
rapidly.
Rolodex with the phone number. Now it's passwords.
Yeah.
How many passwords do you have stored in your brain? Oh, this one needs a control character.
Yeah, this one's 16 characters. This one's 9. But that's just it. We advance rapidly as humanity and very rapidly consider something defunct and push it away. So, yeah, the technology to build the pyramids 100 years later may not have been necessary in any way, shape, or form. So why remember it? You know, did we need aliens to build the pyramids? I personally don't think so, because we're a very ingenuitive species. We do amazing things. You know, put the professor on Gilligan's Island, see what happens. The man will make a battery out of a coconut. You know, and you can do it. You could do it. But yeah, like we know that they had Nagamati batteries. We know that ancient Egyptians had electroplating, things like that. So to think that they were just agrarian idiots is silly. It's silly.
So, you know, there's the Dendara light bulb, you know, the image in Egypt.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's the speculation that they used like the batteries, the Baghdad batteries, to light inside while they were painting and carving inside the pyramids and other structures, funerary structures. You know, and you go, okay, whatever. And then it's like, but how do you get light down there? And there's the whole mirror thing, which has been disproven. And I'm just going to tell this very funny story.
Go ahead.
And so, you know, they're like, oh, well, they had little torches down there that they burned, you know, candles or whatever, so you could sit there and see stuff. So I lived in this house, and I had a candle that was on this one spot in my kitchen. And it was always lit. You know, it was... Anyway... So I was having Thanksgiving at my house, and I'm cleaning, and there's kind of soot on the wall, you know, so I take a sponge, and I'm trying to wash the soot off, and it is not coming off. So now I'm there with the soft scrub and the magic erase thing, and I am scrubbing.
Yeah.
I repainted my entire kitchen. In time, because once I started cleaning it, it just spread
smeared. It just smeared the creosote everywhere.
And that made me go, they could not have been using flames down there, because there would have been remnants.
There would have been residue all
everywhere.
over the walls. All over the walls. Exactly. And, you know, that's kind of what we just had Stephen Myers on the show from the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation. And I love him, for his Orion correlation theory stuff, and just the idea of like correlation is not causation. Stop with that. That's not science. But also the idea that, you know, we have forgotten ourselves. There are numerous ways that they could have built this using water locks, like he says, you know, flooding the area, barging it in and dropping you've already brought it halfway down the Nile to the location. Why would you take it off and drag it through the dirt? Why wouldn't you just skim the area with water and float the barge right on over? You know, it makes much more sense logically. So, yeah, things like that. And even the idea that if the Great Pyramid was a tomb, I guess by all Egyptology that we know, they wanted that dude to never go to the afterlife. There's no inscriptions from the Book of the Dead on the wall. Nothing like that. So whoever was there, like, your soul is staying there and never leaving, dude.
But they never found the body.
Yeah.
You know, so that's kind of challenging. Or grave goods or anything. And
once again, no spells on the wall for set to weigh your heart against a feather. Like, you are not getting into the afterlife without these spells from the Book of the Dead, is what Egyptology tells us. So where are all the spells? Egyptology, if that is a tomb, you know. So, yeah, we have to be willing to question not only what's there, but what we've been taught. And even the idea, once again, to bring this back to the idea of reptilians and questioning that concept that we as a society have, that they're somehow evil. Once again, when you look at ancient texts, when you look at, like, the Temple of Asclepius, for example, when you look at the wand of Hermes, when you look at the wand of Moses that was given to him in the desert, things like that, all reptilian, all reptiles, all snakes, everything else. All these things are based in that because that's the healing side of things, oddly enough. So it's really interesting to see how modern society has twisted that reptilian presence to something evil.
So I'm going to
The same way we did religiously.
fill your religious coffer. So according to myth, if you sit there, so in my book, E.T. Chronicles, What Myth and Legends Have to Say About Human Origin, it talks about our history based on myth, and it's a chronology of this is what happened.
Yeah.
And according to that chronology, the fertility gods, the reptilians, came to the earth first because they had a battle with the progenitor gods and escaped, come to the earth. And so they were here first. So there are the stories. It's like, well, we were here first, and so you sky gods need to go. And I'm going to use Greek, so Kronos, fertility god, he's depicted with snake legs, gets into the battle with Zeus for control over the earth. Well, Zeus is always depicted as a white dude with a beard, and he lives in the sky above the mountains and above the birds. And so Kronos loses the war. He is sent to the depths of Tartarus to live for 1,000 years. But now the sky gods control everything. And they're the ones that set the programming and made those reptilians be evil.
Yeah. Even to the point of the curse of Medusa. And that was always one that strangely sat with me. I was very fascinated with Greek mythology in junior high and high school, like before we even read it in school. And it was one of those like, okay, so she gets raped by a god and she's the one that gets punished. I'm trying to figure that out. But once again, punished to the point of being reptilian, to the point that her sight is hideous to any that behold her. Once again, even beholding the reptilian at that point becomes a death sentence for those.
But there are stories that if you gaze upon the face of a god, you will die.
Yes.
And so that piece might have come out of that portion of literature.
And my brother and I were talking about that literally this morning before we came over here, the idea of angelic beings and even UFOs, things like that. Whenever you look at especially the biblical interpretation, the wheels of Ezekiel, things like that, the interpretation of seraphim, where they are almost terrible in appearance. If you were to look at something in the fifth dimension from a third dimensional perspective, like you would be looking at folds on folds on folds of reality. So that could be terrifying to imagine, looking at your own face with folds of your own face inside of it. Like that could be terrifying. So the idea that maybe even those mountain gods that we're talking about were of a different dimensional being, and that's why you can't behold their face, is because we can't see into that dimension. And if you do, it's terrifying and you don't want to look in there.
Well, you sit there and you think of people that that are experiencers, and there are some people that make it through the encounter and they find it interesting and they have this experience. And then there are other people that leave with trauma, and I think for many people, especially people from ancient times, to sit there and see something like that would be a traumatic event.
Absolutely. Even now, it's a traumatic event. It drives families apart.
And we have X-Files.
Well, it's quite literally, and it's something that we talk about all the time on the show with experiencers. You look at cases like Terry Lovelace, with his experience in Devil's Den State Park with his friend. They were quite literally EMT technicians together for almost 20 years. That's like rolling with a cop partner. You see some things and you go through some depth and you bind with a person in a different way when you're saving lives on the daily. For them to both experience that and then never talk about it to the point that it drove them apart because they can't talk about it and they don't know how to talk about this traumatic experience that happened to them. Because it is traumatic. Normally right now is when I point to the wall of books behind me from signed authors and experiencers. And it's like, yes, it ends like a Disney movie, but it also starts like a Disney movie, which means the first 5 minutes is horrifying for somebody involved, you know? And it's that metastatic change that happens to them, that hypostatic change, where you learn to process it through a different lens, and you also learn to process reality through a different lens now because of that experience. And yeah, sometimes it doesn't shake out well for some people, sadly. And that's where people like you come in, Rita, who do soul work and help people find these spiritual turmoils in their life and shake the ticks off the dog.
Yeah. Or at least come to accept what's going on. And it's like, okay, it really sucked, but it really sucked.
But where can we carry it from here is the point. You know, like, yes, that's a point in your life. It may be a pivot point and a crux point, but where's it winding you to, and where do you fly to from there is the important thing. You know, so I love talking with you. It's
I love
always
talking
great.
to you too.
We could go literally all day, Rita. Let everybody know where they can go to keep up with you, where they can go to find your research, your movies, where they can go to get a soul session with you, because your work is absolutely awesome.
Thank you. So my website is soulhealer.com. soulhealer.com, and it's loaded with articles and videos, and you can get copies of my books or any, you know, my movie Icon. You can get a copy of that there, or you can download it from there. And I just want to do this little pitch. So I do a live stream on Thursday night. It's called Thursday Night Live with Dr. Rita Louise. And you know what?
It's free.
No, that's me.
Yeah. But it's a great show. It's awesome. You do live readings on there, all kinds of stuff. It's really fantastic.
It's really a lot of fun. Really a lot of fun. Thursday night, the easiest way for people to find it is to go to my YouTube channel, which is Just Energy Radio. And I'm going to be very clear. It's 3 words, Just Energy Radio. Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central. Click the live link, and it'll make it so that you can enter the chat and just get a reading on air. Hang out.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're
always
so
a pleasure.
welcome.
While you are online checking out everything from Dr. Rita Louise at soulhealer.com and at Just Energy Radio on YouTube, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can like, follow, subscribe, share, comment. It's where you can find all of our episodes, all of our live coverage from amazing events like Texas UFOCon. Stay tuned through this quick break. We will be right back after these commercial messages with more coverage from Texas UFOCon right here at Curious Realm, right after this.
The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com, or visit the official Curious Realm store at CuriousRealm.com/store. to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is CuriousRealm.com/store.